Hello and welcome to Sixth Form College Social Science team. This evening we're doing a combined presentation for Sociology, Economics and Politics. And fantastic. We have three colleagues this evening who are going to be part of the presentation. I'm Julie Watts, Assistant Curriculum Leader. I'm here with my colleague Manish Patel, and our colleague Peter Sangera is going to be on the chat function, and he will answer some queries as we go along, but also we'll do some Q&A at the end of the session as well, because it may be that we cover your question later in the session. If you have any questions at all, do type them in the chat box. We may not respond to every single question because there may be a combination of questions that are very similar. So please listen out for similar questions. Again, thank you for joining us this evening. So in terms of social sciences, which is the collective name for our subjects of economics, politics and sociology, I think there are some things that we have in common, whichever subject you're interested in, you're going to benefit from. They're all analytical subjects, so we question why things happen, the impact and consequence of change, and we're always looking to develop critical thinking skills. Obviously, questioning and evaluating are key skills that any employer is going to be looking for. If you're thinking about higher education, they're going to be important skills that you develop for university. All of our subjects are very well respected and regarded subjects for any university course in humanities, social sciences, the arts, and very top universities all look favourably on these subjects, obviously, if you're coming in with top grades. What we really have in common is the world of social science is interested in helping you understand the world in which we live. We want you to question all the things that you've taken for granted about how the world works. Every day there's a big issue that's going on, that's in the news, that in our classrooms we'll be talking about. So it really is a question about, if you're interested in the world in which we live in, you will really find our subjects of sociology, economics and politics incredibly interesting.
Good evening, I'm Manish and I'll be focusing on economics for this part of the presentation. Now, many of you think that economics is just about finance, but it's not really. As Julie's just said, it is a social science, so we look at people and we look at the choices that people make. As you can see on the screen, it's got the science of choice. Now, when we look at people, we look at people in terms of households, firms and the government. And the only reason why people think it's about finance is when we come to analyse those choices, evaluate those choices, we have to measure those choices. And the way we measure those choices is in monetary terms. And so all the information, all the data surrounding economics is usually given in monetary terms, but that's just the end result. We have to look at how we got to those choices in the first place. I'll now just go on to talking about the assessment once sociology and politics side of this slide has been talked about.
Hi, good evening. I'm Peter Sangera. I'm also going to be on the chat, and I'll quickly just run through the fascination that sociology holds as a subject. As the slide tells you, we're not historians, but we have to have some sense of the past. We're not futurologists, so our focus is the present, the contemporary nature of British society. So, for example, we will focus on the relationship between the individual and society. Two areas you will be familiar with is how our family life influences us and how our educational experiences influence us. And as the slide shows, one of the big areas we do look at is why have now girls overtaken boys in terms of GCSE results and are now performing better. So overall, it's a critical subject which will require you to think about the everyday life you live and how society has influenced your life. I'll now pass over to Julie.
Okay, so politics has a lot in common with economics and with sociology, and more than anything we want to develop active citizens in our democracy. We want you to question what it is that governments are doing, and when you feel the need, try and bring about change. In politics, one of the key things we look at is democracy, ruled by the people. That's what makes us different from countries like North Korea. We are interested in what do the people want. So if you're interested in discovering, why, how, where decisions are made, and you're interested in exploring British and American politics and answering both of those questions, you'll find this course very interesting. Particularly at the moment, I think there's a lot of concern around, particularly in America, about how healthy their democracy is at the moment. So everything that we're studying is happening in real time. In terms of the assessment, all of our courses are 100% examination. So whether you're choosing sociology, economics or politics, it's all 100% examination, no coursework. And all of them have 3 two-hour papers at the end of 2 years. Obviously, along the way, we'll have lots of practice questions, but your final grade will be based on 3 two-hour papers at the end of 2 years. In politics, that assessment will largely be in extended writing, so you have to be comfortable with the essay writing skills that you've been developing in English and history and subjects like that at GCSE. Some of our questions will have sources in and some will not. So those of you again who've perhaps done history, or I think business studies sometimes has that as well, you're used to looking at sources. But the thing is that all our questions are through extended writing. Manish is going to tell you a little bit about economics in a moment, but just to say that sociology is also extended writing, but it does also have some shorter questions which focus much more on application of knowledge.
Thanks, Julie. Right, with economics, a lot of students ask, do you have to be good at maths? Is a lot of maths involved? And maybe at degree level, but at A level, the term we use is that you've got to be numerically literate. Now that just means that you're presented with some data and you have to interpret that data. There's not much calculations involved. All we're looking for is causes, relationships, and how does the data show the theory? How does the data show what's happening in the real world in terms of the choices that governments are making, the choices that firms make, and the choices that us as individuals make. So that's how the paper in economics is structured. And as you can see in section B across all 3 papers, there are essays that for you to write. Now those essays, the format it follows is the same as with politics and in sociology. You can't just rely on the theory alone. You have to apply it to real world issues, apply it to the information that's given on the exam paper. Now the information that's given in the exam paper is could be quite numerous, and it could be in the form of graphs, pie charts, or just tables of data. I'm just talking about economics here, and you have to use that data to help you write your essay. There's also a number of diagrams that you need to learn. So we should say when you're writing an essay, you think like a mathematician, and you've got to write like a historian. So you have to put forward both sides of the argument. You have to put forward if there are any biases, any political biases out there. Where was the source? Where was the data from? Is the data outdated? And then you come to an overall conclusion.
Yes, just to pick up on a little something that Manish was saying about the source material that's provided in economics, that often it's data form. It's just worth saying in politics also, we sometimes have data presented in our source as well, but we're not interested in the maths of it, as Manish was saying. We're interested in how can we interpret it, what does it tell us, and sometimes more importantly, what does it not tell us? Those are good questions that politics students ask. In terms of how the politics course is structured, in the first year, we study UK politics and UK government. UK government is about how the decisions are made, who's involved, the institutions. So you'll be very familiar with the news where often the Prime Minister and pictures of Parliament are shown. And that's really the focus of UK government. UK politics, on the other hand, is much more about us as individuals. How can we be involved in politics? How can we influence those decisions that are made in Parliament? How can we influence what's happening around COVID regulations, or what's happening around whether or not we should have mandatory vaccinations, what's happening about whether or not we should have shops open or schools open? You know, we can get involved through the media, we can get involved through how we vote, we can get involved through joining pressure groups, joining political parties, and we look at how effective that is. At the end of the first year, we look at the big ideas really that underpin British politics: conservatism, liberalism and socialism. These are the ideas where people look at the world, and not only do they see a different solution to problems, they often see a different problem depending on how they look at the world. So for some people, when they look at things like mandatory vaccinations, they see that as a solution, but for other people, they see the mandatory vaccinations as part of the problem. So that's what we'll be looking at in our first year of politics. In the second year, we very much do a comparative with the American system. So all that we've studied in Britain around Parliament, the Prime Minister, political parties, we look at the equivalent of what's happening in America, and we look at the strengths and weaknesses of both approaches. Sometimes we look at things in British politics and we think that's not really working very well. Wouldn't it be better if we did something different? Then we look at the American system and we think, oh, maybe our system isn't so bad after all, or maybe they do have a good solution for us. So that's the comparative element. The last part of the course that we look at is an optional section of ideas about anarchism, which rejects the idea that there should be rulers making decisions on our behalf. So that's a very different approach to looking at how the world should work, and students usually find that incredibly interesting. I'm going to pass you over to Peter now for the sociology overview.
Thank you, Julie. Good evening again. As you can see, in the first year, we look at families and households, and we also look at the study of the education system. I'll give you a couple of examples there to illustrate that. For example, when we look at the family, we will ask questions and examine the evidence and arguments and theories on why, for example, divorce has risen. Why do fewer people get married? Why are there increasing numbers of people living together and not being married? We'll also explore conjugal roles, which is who does what within the household. For example, who does the cooking, cleaning, who's looking after the children? Is it the man's role or is it the woman's role? When we look at the education system, we've already mentioned we look at educational achievement, but we also look at educational policies and educational reform, and both of those areas as cut across well with politics in particular. There's always reference to economics there as well. So it's the relationship between the subjects comes out in sociology. Theory and methods underpins both years, and you'll focus at the start of the course on theories for explaining why, for example, social inequality exists, why racism still exists in society. On to the second year, we will look at crime and deviance in detail. For example, why do men commit more crime than women? Does the prison system work? Does sending somebody to prison actually rehabilitate them, or does it actually make them more criminal? Prisons are often described as the universities of crime. We also focus on belief in society, primarily on the nature of religion and how that has changed and whether it is still important in the context of British society. But similarly, as in politics, we will compare Britain to America, because America has higher rates of religiosity compared to the UK. So we will explore in both countries the nature of secularization, and if religion has declined, how much has it declined over the last 100 years or so. Thank you. I will now pass you to Manish.
Okay, so what are the course requirements for the three subjects that the social sciences offer? In terms of politics and sociology, it's the same as a college. Entry requirements, that is, you need 2 6s or above at GCSE and a further 3 GCSEs at grade 4 above, ensuring that you also get at least a grade 4 in both English language and mathematics. Economics is slightly different. The additional requirement that we ask you to have is that you need to get at least a grade 5 in either English or maths. Okay, so you need a 5 in English or maths, not necessarily both, but you need a grade 5 in English or maths.
So what type of student enjoys sociology? Peter's just going to revisit that for you.
Thank you, Julie. The nature of sociology, as I outlined already, does focus on who we are as people and how we live our lives. So the answer to the question of which type of student enjoys sociology, all types of students, in fairness, do enjoy sociology. To be clearer there, specifically students who enjoy discussing and debating and want to be challenged and enjoy asking questions about things in our everyday lives. Perhaps we don't ask questions. For example, why do now girls achieve better than boys? Why do women still do most of the domestic and emotional work within the home, looking after children and the cooking and the cleaning? And for example, when we look at religion, we will pose the question, are ethnic minorities, for example, more religious than the indigenous white population in the UK? For example, we know there's higher religiosity for Indians, Sikhs, Indian Hindus and Pakistani Muslims compared to other ethnic groups. So again, if the type of student who enjoys the subject wants to be challenged, wants to ask questions and ultimately is willing to make their case, make their argument on the basis of evidence and critical thought. I will now pass you over to Manish in a second. So sociology, as I've already said, goes well with politics. It goes really, really well with economics. It complements criminology very, very well. And again, as the slide show, a lot of students will pick a combination of politics, sociology and law because there is a lot of crossover in terms of skills, content as well, which is important. Psychology is also a very popular subject which works well with sociology, primarily because we're looking at human behaviour, but also because the research methods, how sociologists and psychologists research people's behaviour, you will find a lot of commonality in those areas. I will now pass you over to Manish.
Right, you can see the slide is following the same format. So what type of student enjoys economics? Well, the same as those students who enjoy politics and sociology. And we ask the questions why, how and where. So for example, the decision of why was £300 billion borrowed by the government in response to COVID? Why is our lateral flow tests free in the UK, whereas in Australia they have to pay roughly about £5–6 just for one test? So, and you know, how and where are economic decisions made? Well, I've already touched upon this. Economic decisions are made by everyone. Okay, it's a people's choice in terms of individuals making choices, firms making choices, and governments making choices, and then how it impacts on other areas. So for example, you've seen the news today with the problems in Ukraine. How will that affect the decisions that we have to make? Well, one of the areas that will affect our decisions is in terms of gas. So if your parents' gas and electricity bill goes up, they will have to make a choice of, you know, what do they have to cut back on? And we look at different socio-economic groups as well who's been faced with that choice. And that's where it goes really well with sociology. When you look at poverty, do they heat or do they eat? And when choices are made, there's no right answer. I just mark in some year 12 students assessed work, and when they come to the conclusion, they're saying which is the best choice, and the better students said there is no best choice. The word best is quite subjective, and it depends upon an individual's point of view and the government's political point of view. So those are the type of students who enjoys economics. Now, one of the questions that they always seem to ask when we have our open evenings or in open days is, what's the difference between business studies and economics? So we've got certain scenarios here. in business studies, we look at the individual business themselves. They look at the individual brands themselves. So you have McDonald's versus Burger King. If you look at Google, just look at their profits. People in EasyJet losing their workers. Whereas in economics, we don't distinguish between brands. We don't look at individual firms. We look at a bigger picture. We sort of put them all together. So rather looking at Burger King versus McDonald's, we'll just look at the market for fast food, with the growth in fast food. What are the social costs for fast food? Does that impact on the government? Rather than looking at Google, we look at the market structure. So we look at monopoly and we look at the competition. And with EasyJet laying off workers, well, how will that affect the local economy? Looking at unemployment as a whole. So that's how we can see the difference between business and economics. Economics takes a wider view. We don't distinguish between individual brands or firms. We group them together and how it affects society as a whole. Now, what subjects go well with economics? Well, of course, with one of the choices that's made is to do with the government. So politics is a good choice that goes well with economics. I said earlier, you've got to think like a historian, think like a mathematician, but write like a historian. So history and maths is quite a popular subject combination, and also with sociology, with poverty and economics, that goes well together, and also geography with globalization and the impact that the Chinese and Indian economy has on the economy of the UK. So in terms of subject areas, it goes well with quite a wide range of subjects. Some students think, should I do economics, business and accounting? We sort of recommend against that. It's too narrow. Okay, plenty of students have gone on to do accounting from this college onto an accounting degree without doing accountancy, and so forth. Now, so social science students choose economics because it gives them a broader perspective on the wide world, and I've noticed also that a number of scientists are choosing economics as their third subject as well.
Thanks, Manish. So you can see very similar format for the questions for what type of student enjoys politics, because as Peter and Manish have both said, all students really enjoy politics. If you are interested and curious about how, why and where decisions are made, this is a course that will hopefully answer some of those. If we compare America and Britain, I mentioned the vaccine mandate earlier. Well, here in the UK, that decision is made by our government. Is it made by Parliament or is it made by the Prime Minister? Depends whether we're talking about in theory and practice. If we go to America, you may have noted last week that the Supreme Court there told the elected politicians, they told Joe Biden, the president, who was the people's choice for president, that he couldn't mandate that vaccines should be required. And so there we have decisions made by a different set of people who are unelected and are not answerable to the people. So if you're willing to engage with current political events, every single day something happens that we can link to the course. You may have seen over the weekend that a lot of NHS workers across the country and across our region were protesting because they don't want to have to get a vaccination, and the government has required that they have to get a vaccination if they continue working in the NHS. How can we relate that to our course? We look at different views of freedom. Whose freedom is more important? Their freedom not to have a vaccination, or the freedom of patients, other colleagues that they might come into contact with who may be impacted by their decision not to have a vaccination. So there's no right or wrong answer, as Manish was saying. It's just different points of view, and it's who's in power with the ability to get their point of view into law that is significant at any given time. Now, obviously, some of you will come into the course and you'll be very interested and have a lot of background knowledge in politics, but some of you may have actually thought this evening, this sounds like a subject that I could be really interested in, but I don't know anything about it yet. And that's the whole point of doing the course. You don't have to know anything about the course at the moment, you just have to be interested in finding out the answers. So what goes well with politics? Well, not surprisingly, economics goes very well, very similar questions. Sociology, history is an excellent combination for politics. You know, whatever we're studying today, in 50 years' time, the historians will be looking back at it and using their skills to look at the same issues. Geographers, there's a lot of crossover with the geography as well. Law, many students who go on to law find politics a great grounding. Obviously, you know, what is law, but the application of what politicians have decided. Those of you who enjoy English, particularly English literature, the skills you develop, the critical thinking skills, the questioning skills, the writing skills are excellent for all of the social sciences. But it doesn't really stop there. Lots of students who are interested in art and drama will be attracted to politics. I have a student at the moment who's going for a drama course, and he's going to write an essay about political satire as part of his application process. I had a student a couple of years ago who's very interested in looking at maths and politics. A student last year who's interested in medicine but just wanted something as a balancing subject. So really, whatever subjects you're interested in, politics will offer you skills that complement those subjects. And really that brings us to the idea of careers in social scientists. You can see on the screen, you know, a range of media, law, criminal justice, excellent for sociology, very similar for politics, journalism, media comes up very much. In terms of economics, obviously the marketing, employment, journalism, finance, investment, etc., all great courses, but individually, the sort of courses that students go on to in politics, you can see some will do politics, economics, journalism, history, geography, American studies. Lots of students do a combination, so they might do economics and politics, or politics, philosophy and economics. So for instance, one of our recent successes, Connie, who came from Linden School, one of our partner schools, studying politics, philosophy and economics at university. And as you can see, really enjoyed the passion of her subjects here, and Manish can offer you a similar insight into economics.
Of course, yeah. So as I say, what type of students do economics? There isn't one specific type of students that does economics. So these are some of the degrees that students have gone on to who have studied A-level economics. So you can see some wide range of subjects, and an example of one of my success stories was Joy, who came from Kesh, and she went on to do economics and maths with a year abroad, and she really enjoyed the college here and the teaching and just being the independence at college itself.
Fantastic. So in terms of sociology, probably, you know, a lot of crossover in terms of similarity, in terms of law, in terms of media, but perhaps more who might go into a healthcare direction. Some will go into HR management. That's quite a popular area, that sociology skills are excellent for that. A recent case study of a very successful student who did sociology, interestingly, well, did sociology really as her third option. You know, she was going very interested in her languages. She was a great historian, but she found that sociology was an excellent complementary subject. So although it wasn't her main subject, you know, she did very well because it complemented the direction that she was hoping to go in. So that sort of brings us to the end of our brief review of our three subjects here in social sciences. You can see on the screen there is a how to apply slide. The easiest thing to do is to go to our website. And if you go to the website, you'll see there's a section there applying step by step. We use a system called Applica, and so all the communication that you do with the college, your replies will come from Applica, and you just register on the system. Everything is done electronically. We will contact your school for a reference. We do obviously ask you to put your predicted grades into your application, and if your application indicates that you're going to be suitable for our college and the courses that you're looking for, we will invite you to interview. We have started our interviews this year, but we will be continuing interviews right through the rest of the academic year. So if you haven't applied yet, don't worry, there's still plenty of time. At the end of the academic year, just before you go into the summer holidays, after you've taken your examinations, we will invite you into a taster session, and then obviously once results come in, that's when we invite you in for enrolment. So as I say, that's a brief run through our 3 subjects this evening. So we do have a short time for any additional questions. So if you have some questions that haven't been asked yet, do pop them in the chat. We'll try and answer some questions orally rather than putting it in the chat. So are there any, Peter, that you think would be useful to address at this point?
Yes, is there any enrichment availabilities within the college that could complement any of the social sciences?
Well, the social science courses, we have a number of enrichments that are particularly focused in our area, such as the Social Science Academy, which allows you to do an excellent EPQ in an area, a subject of your choice. Manish usually leads on this.
So, as well as doing EPQs, we've gone to various universities. We've been to Coventry, Birmingham and Aston, where they've given talks to A-level students. Also, we've been to the Chamber of Commerce, and a few years ago, a number of students from the Social Sciences Academy were interviewed for a programme on Radio 5 on vaping. So, and these are the things that employers and universities like to see on their application form, because you're going outside of what you read in the textbook and you're showing a passion for the social science subjects.
Many students, particularly obviously who study politics, but certainly not just politics, will join the student council and help to make decisions and give feedback on what's working and what could be improved here in college. Lots of students also like to join the debating society. All our subjects involve lots of debate. We also have the Model United Nations, which is an annual competition which many students, use their debating skills as part of. And there are a wide range of activities across the college which will be very interesting to you. So I think we don't seem to have any additional questions at this point. We'll just do wait a moment to see if anyone wants just to add a final question in. Okay, well, thank you very much for joining us this evening, and I hope to see you perhaps for an interview later in the year.
Thank you very much.